This is Kerrigan and Company. Did you know that more than 90% of cyber attacks can be prevented? Focus Technology helps organizations create a cybersecurity framework to minimize your risk of being attacked. Let Focus Technology's certified team conduct an assessment to determine where the gaps are in your organization, no matter how big or small your company is. Utilizing the industry's best tools, Focus Technology security operations team will monitor and stop bad actors before it's too late. Contact Focus Technology today at focustsi.com and secure your company's most valuable assets. That's focustsi.com. A&B Burger in Beverly and A&B Kitchen and Bar in Boston are redefining guest expectations of a casual restaurant. Both A&B restaurant locations are focused on hospitality, creative menus, and delicious food and drinks. Now, I've been to both restaurants many times and loved everything I've tried. Get to A&B Burger on Cabot Street in Beverly or head across the street from our studio at the TD Garden to A&B Kitchen and Bar in Boston today and experience the A&B difference yourself. I promise you're going to love it. Today's episode is all about inspiration, and my co-host has one of the most amazing stories that you'll ever hear. That's coming up next on Kerrigan and Company.
Kerrigan and Company is here for you. Yes, Kerrigan and Company is here for you.
Welcome, everybody, to Kerrigan and Company, presented by A&B Burger. So great to have you along. Here we are on our fourth episode, and this is a very special episode. I feel really strongly about it. This is an episode about inspiration, and it's about art and how the two can help in healing. And my guest and my co-host, who's keeping me company today, is someone very special. It's good to introduce you to the general manager of the North Shore Music Theater, a place that I love, by the way. This is Karen Nascembeni. And Karen, first off, you and I have known each other for a long time.
Years, yeah.
Yeah, we were just chatting here in the studio a little bit about our history together and just all the years that I was in the media and going up to the North Shore Music Theater and covering all kinds of shows, and it's just a great place.
It sure is. It sure is. And you're one of the few people who is not an employee or an actor who's actually flown above our stage.
Yes, I have, and it was a frightening experience to say the least. You know what I always say, and we're going to talk a lot more about the theater a little later in the show. But one of the things I love about it is that it's in the round, and once you see a show in the round, it's almost hard to go and see something on a flat stage.
I agree.
I agree. You feel left out.
Right. And the actors are better because of it, because they're never not on. They can never turn, they always have their back to someone. So they always have to be moving, and it makes them better actors as a result.
It's an intimate, beautiful place, and I'm anxious to talk to you more about it and what's coming up this coming season and whatever. But there's a story that you agreed to come and tell, and it's one that I think a lot of people know who you are, because obviously you're a very high-profile person there on the North Shore and all around Boston. But this is a part of your life that maybe everybody doesn't know. We are about to commemorate. I never say celebrate, or I don't call it an anniversary. These kinds of events are a commemoration to me.
I agree.
We're about to commemorate 4 years since the pandemic began. And what I think a lot of people don't know about you is how the pandemic affected your life. Your story is one that's tragic. There's no two ways about that. But what is incredible about your story is the inspiration and what's come out of it. So let's go back 4 years, if you don't mind, to share the story, because I think that those who are listening can gain so much from this story. And Karen, we all remember, I was working in the media, and it was the end of February, and we started to hear about this pandemic, or this disease, this sickness that was happening in the Northwest. And then slowly but surely, we started to hear about events that were happening here in the Boston areas as we got into March of 2020. So let's back up with you, and you tell me where it all started for you.
Sure. So it was the beginning of March, and I became very, very ill. I was misdiagnosed with a sinus infection, as was my husband. We both became very ill. We were two of the first people in Massachusetts to contract what they were then calling coronavirus. And no one really knew at the time how to treat it, what it was. There was not even testing, if you recall back then. So we gradually got sicker and sicker, and I finally called my doctor and I said, I've been through a lot medically in my lifetime. I said, this is something very different. And I had been diagnosed with a sinus infection with a secondary virus, undetermined. And so I called her and she said, geez, Karen, it sounds like you have coronavirus. So at the time, you couldn't even just go into the emergency room. You had to be called in advance. So I was delirious. So I should never have driven. I said to Stephen, he was so much sicker than I was this one morning of St. Patrick's Day, and I said, I'm going to call an ambulance. And he said, no. He said, please drive me. And we were both, completely out of it because we were so oxygen deprived. And I drove
Which you didn't know at the time.
No, I had no idea. We were just kind of delirious, honestly. Right. And people were dropping off food on our doorstep. And we just, went by what the doctor said, that we thought this was something that was going to pass. So I drove him that morning to the hospital. And we called in ahead from the car. And they came out and they took him. And when he got out of the car, he turned around and he blew me a kiss. And he touched his heart and he said, I love you. And he waved to me, and I said, I love you too. And honestly, I've told this story so many times, but I felt like a little schoolgirl. Like, it was so beautiful the way he said it. And that was the last time I saw him.
So let's fill in a few details here, not to leave it, as if that isn't strong enough. But your husband's name?
Stephen Richard.
Stephen Richard. You guys had been married?
Almost 20 years. Almost 20 years. Together 30 years.
Was it typical for him to turn and look at you and say, I love you, and walk away?
We were a very loving couple, and we never left the house without kissing each other goodbye and saying, I love you, ever. I mean, if he would go down the street, not even a mile away, to the town dump with some, leaves or whatever, and I would see his car pulling out and he hadn't done that, I would call him and say, what are you doing? Get back here right now. What if you got killed on the way? And we would laugh about it. But no, that was who we were. We had a really beautiful marriage. And the beautiful part about that is that I knew it in the moment, not just looking back. So it was never wasted on me. I knew how lucky I was and how precious it was.
So he's gotten out of the car and gone into the emergency room. And I am assuming you probably have to park the car and wait for them to call you in.
Yes.
I think this is something we've all forgotten about, the fact that those who were ill were not together. And you couldn't see one another. Everybody was separated. Nobody could get in to see you. So what happens in your mind next?
I was sitting in the car, delirious, calling everyone I knew, saying, I don't think Stephen is going to make it, and I'm right behind him. That's how I spent 4 hours in the car. It was literally, when I got to the hospital, it was kind of like what I would describe as a MASH unit. There were like tents, receiving areas, and you just kind of waited your turn until they came to get you. And I just knew when I walked through those doors, there was a room with the blinds drawn, and I thought, that's his room. And I thought, he's not going to make it. And when I came in, they said to me, your husband is very, very ill, Karen. And I knew it. And I called my sister and I said, I don't think Stephen's going to make it. I'm right behind him. And I actually, the networker in me said, I want you to call this person. They're very connected within the hospital world, and I want to be flagged as someone important. Like I was fighting for my life at that point.
Of course.
And so, we went in on a Tuesday. On Friday, this is a beautiful part of the story and our love story. On Friday, I had to go to the next level of care, and there were no beds available. And Stephen was med-flighted to Leahy Clinic to a step-up care. And then the following Tuesday, so I got his bed. I got his bed when he was released. And then the following Tuesday, a week later, I was on death's door and needed to get into that unit in Leahy, and there were no beds available, and he died. And I got his bed again, and I was then med-flighted from Winchester to Leahy, where they basically saved my life. But I was in a coma for 31 days, in the hospital in total for 65 days.
Now, Karen, when you say that you got his bed and that he had passed away, you didn't know any of this was happening.
I did not.
You, at this point, are on a ventilator.
Yes.
And my understanding is in an induced coma.
Yes.
Where you stayed for 31 days. And you had moments during that time period. You're someone who can actually talk about that.
Yeah.
Most people, we never know these stories because they don't have that opportunity to come back and share the story with us. Talk a little bit and tell people about, you've already talked about it, what's so inspirational is I do truly believe Stephen was making arrangements for you, but talk about what happened during that time period.
When I was in the coma, when you're in intensive care, it's very common to have hallucinations, but COVID hallucinations were on another level. I saw it, and they were horrific nightmares. Like I could write a horrifically scary Netflix series about it. And I watched my nieces and nephews get murdered in these very, dramatic ways. And I saw people having affairs that were in happy marriages. I saw all sorts of things that later came true. And it was clearly one of those situations where I was kind of up here looking down at what was happening in the world. But the whole time, Stephen was with me. And he would just look at me, and he never spoke to me. He would just nod his head slowly, like, "You're going to be okay, honey. You're going to be okay." So when I woke up, I couldn't speak to anyone for 5 days because, as they said, you were communicating on a level that only you could understand. But when I spoke to my sister 5 days later and she had to tell me that Stephen had died, I said to her, "I know that." And she said, "Well, how do you know?" And I said, "Because he was with me the whole time." And she was shocked to hear that. But he was. And to this day, I mean, I'm a believer that there's nowhere in the universe for us to go but here. And I feel him so deeply. And he has given me and our friends and family so many signs. The funny story about that was on our anniversary right before he died, I thought I was going to die. I was having these horrible premonitions. And we were up at Ocean Point, Maine, at the Ocean Point Inn. And I said to him, "I want you to promise me something that I know you love it here. We've been coming here for 20 years. We got married here. Actually, we've been coming there for 30 years. I said, I want you to promise me if anything happens to me, you'll come back here." And he said, "Why are you talking like this? Stop, like that. I don't like it." And I just had this feeling, and he said to me, "Karen, you can never die before me because I could never live without you." And I said, "Well, let's promise each other something." I said, "Whoever goes first, we'll send each other and our friends and family lots of signs." And he has delivered that in spades, like through mediums, just through, blowing up a light bulb. Just a quick funny story, right? The day after he died, my niece went to a medium, and she said, in Springfield, not even in this area, they didn't know my story. And she said, someone very close to you, like a dad, died. But he's not your dad, he's, but close to your father. And his wife is really sick, and she's in the hospital. And she's like, "Oh my God, yes." And she said, "He wants you to know that he's going to come back to you in a form of light, like a light bulb exploding, like a flash of light, like a photographer's bulb." And she said, "Yes, he was a photographer." And I can walk into a room and a bulb will just explode. Like, they don't do that anymore. I've had so many crazy things happen to me. And it's usually when we're talking about him or I need an answer, yes or no.
Right.
And
I'm watching for the bulbs in here right now. Stephen, if you're here, my friend, it's okay. Let's see it. It'd be great. Karen, your story, it's even more complex, and it's as if you haven't told us enough story. The beauty of this story is that you have survived and you are healthy and well. But when you came to after 31 days, and you said that you knew that Stephen had gone, he wasn't the only one.
Right. So I said to my sister, "Who else?" And she said, "I'm sorry to say, Skipper, your father-in-law, my father-in-law, Earl Richard." And I said, "Who else?" And she said, "Your dear friend Don Kelly." And Don and I he would MC all the events on the North Shore, and or he would be the auctioneer, and I would MC them. We did so many charitable events together. He was a dear friend. And I said, "Who else?" And she said, "That's it." And I said, "Well, that's enough." I remember exactly that's what I said. "Well, that's enough." And then she had to explain that the world was shut down. And, we're a typical Italian family. When someone's in the hospital, my whole family's there, and we're feeding the staff. We're bringing in cold cuts and that kind of thing. And I was alone, and I was paralyzed because I was trying to break out of the coma. The doctor said to my sister, "Your sister is a maniac." She's like, she is so sedated, and she's still fighting it. And I remember in my hallucinations, I was always trying to get out of a chair or out of a bed or off of a couch, but they had paralyzed me to calm me down. And it was, and when I woke up, I had to learn how to walk all over again because I had been paralyzed for so long. And, I could barely feed myself, and my family wasn't there.
Right.
When they told me about Stephen, the nurse, God bless her, had to hold the phone up, to me on speaker so that I could hear this news with this stranger who held my hand. And I have to say, the nurses and doctors during that time, they were doing double duty. Like, they were burying people every day and holding my hand at the same time to make sure I was okay because my family couldn't be there. Yeah.
And trying to stay healthy themselves,
yes.
Right?
Yes.
It was a time that none of us could have ever imagined we would live through. That I don't know how you recovered from this. I really don't. You are dealing with such grief. You are dealing with physical issues. just trying to get back into a world. The theater was closed.
Yes.
There was no job. It was just, so tell us, how do you get to the other side of this?
I think in that moment when I grew up, when I woke up rather, I said, my God, Stephen is gone. You're out of a job. And Stephen was the love of my life. And I said, you have to, it was like divinity came through me. I said to myself, you have a decision to make right now in this moment. You can either be miserable about the 30 years you're not going to have with him, or you can be grateful for the 30 beautiful years you did have with him. And it was like gratitude came through me in that moment. I remember just laying in bed and I thought, I am going to do everything I can to get out of here so I can grieve properly when I get to the safety of my sister's house. But I made a conscious decision. I had watched someone die of a broken heart who had as a child and a young adult really, that had no pre-existing health. And she was it was actually my father's mistress. He had had an affair for 30 years. She died right after him. And I thought, it is possible. And I will die of a broken heart if I don't do this properly. And the first thing I did was find a grief counselor, and who I talk to this day. I would talk to her once a week, and then every, once a month, and then every couple weeks. And I actually just called her this week, and I said, I think coming up on the 4-year anniversary, let's have a refresher. But she taught me amazing life skills as to how to survive this type of thing. And I said to her, what do you think? Like, where did my strength come from? And she said, Karen, look at what you've been through. We've all been through a lot and in your life. So I do have some superhuman coping skills, I guess.
You had somewhere to draw from.
Yes, exactly. Because when you've been through as much as I have over the years, you just learn to cope. And you find strength in the people around you. I was never alone. When I got out of the hospital, hundreds of people came and did a parade. You remember they were doing parades back then? I do. And to this day, people still cook for me and bring me food. So it was like leave no man behind. I felt like I got all of my good karma and all of Stephen's good karma all wrapped into one. People still take care of me to this day.
Well, your strength is just amazing and certainly an inspiration for so many people, and something that I'm so happy that I know about when times are hard. I'm going to know who I need to turn to. I know who you turn to, and that's going to be our next guest. That's someone that you have relied upon, and the arts, and the two of you have an incredible story to share with our listeners, and I can't wait to hear that. So that is coming up next right here on Kerrigan & Company. My family and I love to go out for Sunday brunch, so I was really excited to find out that A&B Burger on Cabot Street in Beverly now has brunch on Sundays, and guess what? It's a jazz brunch. I've looked at the menu, and I've got my eye on that avocado Benedict with avocado slices, 2 poached eggs, hollandaise sauce, English muffin, and mixed potato hash. I already know that my husband's going to have the chicken and waffles. He always does. Plus, it's always fun to have a drink at brunch. I'll probably have a Bloody Mary, and somebody at my table will no doubt have a mimosa. Or we'll just wait to see what's on the menu. If you don't have plans this Sunday, then you know what to do. Get to A&B Burger on Cabot Street in Beverly for Sunday Jazz Brunch. If you're looking for a great page-turner book, I highly recommend Trevor. It's written by S. Hilbrey Thompson. Now, unable to escape his past, Matt Stone heads north, leaving behind the memory of his dead wife and son. His journey takes a turn when he comes across his late son's doppelganger, Trevor Reed. Blinded by the resemblance, Matt becomes obsessed and begins to stalk the little boy. Little does Trevor know, he becomes wrapped up in Matt's delusions. Before long, the local authorities, FBI, and an enthusiastic reporter are all actively involved. When Trevor disappears, his family will do anything to get him back. A chase starts on Boston's North Shore and leads to an island on Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire. Trevor is gripping from the first page. It's fast-moving, it's suspenseful, it's touching, and it's tragic all at the same time. I have to tell you, folks, I loved this book, and I highly recommend it. Purchase Trevor by S. Hilbrey Thompson on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and other online book retailers.
If you like rum, you're going to love Rumson's Rum, New England's most award-winning rum brand. Rumson creates distinctive and savory flavor profiles by hand-selecting and marrying the finest barrel-aged Caribbean rums. The spirits are then blended and finished in the New England Rum House. Choose from Rumson's Gold, Spiced, Grand Reserve, or Coffee Rum. which is smooth and sweet with a warm roasted coffee flavor, a hint of vanilla, and a decadent buttery finish. Find Rumson's at liquor stores or ask for it at your favorite restaurant. Learn more at rumsons.com. That's rumsons.com. Rumson's. Life lived, life enjoyed.
I want to tell you about the Northeast Arc, an organization that I am so proud to work with on a regular basis. Northeast Arc has been changing lives and discovering abilities for people with disabilities and autism for some 70 years now. They help people with diverse abilities across Massachusetts live as fully included members of society, choosing for themselves how to live, learn, work, socialize, and play. They're hiring, and if you'd like to join their dedicated team, this is how you do it. Visit ne-arc.org/careers. This segment of Kerrigan & Company is brought to you by Lucia Lighting and Design, where people in the know go for the best possible lighting and design experience. This is Kerrigan & Company. Welcome back, everybody, to Kerrigan & Company. Great to have you with us today. Of course, we are presented by A&B Burger, and we very much appreciate their support. My co-host today is the North Shore Music Theater GM. This is Karen Nascembeni, and it's great to have you with us today. And you've been sharing your song. You've been sharing Well, if you'd like to share a song, I'd love that. You've been sharing your story with us, an incredible story. And we want to take this just a little further, and so we've got a really special guest.
We do. We have Nate Bertone. Nate grew up in the Salem, Mass area and is living in New York now as a multi-hyphenate writer, director, playwright, scenic designer on Broadway, all of the above. Now, most recently, a soon-to-be published author of a children's book, which we'll talk about. But the way Nate came into my life was this 16-year-old usher several years ago came into my office and said, I would love to learn more about the business side of the business. Would you mentor me? And it was the beginning of a beautiful friendship. Mentor protege. Nate is just 29 now, almost 30, and we have had a ride together this past decade. So welcome, Nate. Thank you for being here from New York. Good morning.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for that generous introduction.
Nick,
Yes.
are you okay with the fact that she divulged your age? Because I've told her my age, and I'm hoping she does not divulge it anytime soon.
Well, you and I
actually-
pinky swore to hold that secret.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I've hidden my age, I think, when I was young. When I was 16 and 17, I was, trying to make it in the industry, and I was a very bold kid. I'm still a 29-year-old. But, as you get to 30, people are expecting you to be 30 and beyond. So 29 seems young to many people still.
So to tie this into our first segment, when I was sick, Nate was the person who created this movement. He started a scholarship in Stephen's name at Montserrat College of Art. We are now permanently endowed there. Wow. And he made up T-shirts with two of my favorite expressions, hello party people and hello darling, or come on party people and hello darling. And he sold mugs and T-shirts and what else did you do, Nate? All sorts of things to raise money. And then he threw the parade that I talked about earlier with hundreds of people. And it was epic. And then so my house was under construction when I got sick and when Stephen died, and Nate put together 80 people, and they finished my house so I could come back to no dust and no construction zone, and they redecorated my entire home inside and out while I was recuperating for 4 months at my sister's house.
Wow.
So yeah, we're kind of close, and he's done a few things for me. But then this beautiful project came to be, and Nate, I want you to talk about Seaview Nursing Home for the Newly Deceased and how you came to that idea and how it came to fruition and where we are now with it.
Yeah, thank you. And the journey through the pandemic was a difficult one. I joked about it, and I would say, I called Karen like 7 times a day some days because I need answers and I need to just spitball about questions in the theater industry, and not having her available during that time was it was like a part of me inside had died as well. And it was so strange. I think we were all so separated that there was a really, really hard moment of grappling Stephen's loss and the potential of Karen's loss. Mm-hmm. And to get me through that, I went on these long walks. I came to Salem to kind of be around in case anything happened. And I would go on these long walks and I would listen to this one voicemail that she left me. And it's the only voicemail she's ever left me. She may not know this, that said the words, "I love you." And it was very fast. And it was at the end of a message. And I saved it and I would listen to it over and over again. So now I have the problem where if you try and call me, you can't leave me a voicemail because it's completely full out of fear that any of that is going to ever disappear. So during this time, Stephen had passed away and Karen was still in a coma. And I went on a drive through some towns in New England, and one of them was Danvers, Massachusetts, across, excuse me, sometimes I get choked up talking about this, so bear with me. But from Salem to Danvers, I went through this drive and I passed a sign on the side of the road that hit me, and not physically hit me. It just, hit me as I was moving, and I started crying. And I read the sign, and to me, it said the New England Home for the Dead. And I was immediately washed over with this strange feeling that in that home, Stephen was waiting for Karen, and Stephen was waiting for all of us, because there wasn't a funeral, there wasn't a wake like we standardly grieve. It's almost as if Stephen had just disappeared. So I had seen this sign, the New England Home for the Dead, and during that time while Karen was in a coma, I had this dream. And we talk about the things that she's seen in her COVID hallucinations. And this dream for me felt almost similar to that. And I think it was partially Stephen coming and partially part of the deprivation of, the sensory deprivation of being with each other that we had. And I had this brilliantly vivid dream where Stephen came to me. We were standing outside of a football stadium for some reason. I've never been to a football game with Stephen. I barely go to football games myself. And we were standing in this parking lot, and there I was, and Stephen was walking across the parking lot with a mass of people, and he was heading towards a light, the standard idea of this light. And he looked at me, and I said, Stephen, wait, where are you going? And he said, "I have to go." And I said, "No, please come here." I couldn't form words. And he came up to me and he looked at me and he said, "Please take care of our girl." And he hugged me. And when he hugged me, he disintegrated into sand. He just left, and right through my arms, he disintegrated. And I woke up and I wrote that in my notes app on my phone. And the next morning, I woke up from a very, very similar dream where it was almost like I had the same dream. And I went to my phone to write it down. And there it was, already written in my phone from the middle of the night. You can clock it, 3:30 in the morning. And he was wearing in this dream a blue Hawaiian shirt with a white flowers that it's in a photo that he has. I wasn't ever with him in that photo, but that for some reason he was wearing that, khaki shorts and sandals, and he was going towards this light. And in that moment, when I woke up, I said, whatever I have to do to make sure that Karen is okay, I will do. And weeks later, she wakes up from her coma, and I've been stewing on this idea that Stephen's been waiting in this nursing home, this essentially like abandoned space that was for him, for souls that were waiting for the loved ones to be able to grieve them when we could resume in-person wakes and funerals. And I drove past that place again, and I realized that it said the New England Home for the Deaf, and my brain had created this space to allow me to heal. And it was this strange idea that for weeks I had Stephen just waiting and in a holding place so that he hadn't flown away, he hadn't left into the sky or wherever we go, and he was there. And that ultimately birthed what became the way that I coped and created healing for myself and others that I shared it with during the pandemic, was this piece called the Seaview Nursing Home for the Newly Deceased, which over time, unfortunately, became a piece about multiple people that I had lost. My grandmother is a character in the show. We lost her in 2021. Two of my friends, husband and wife, who passed away later on in the pandemic, they became inspirations for characters. And it was this way of creating healing and also laughter. I think through all of the difficulty we went through, that moment for me to see the New England Home for the Deaf and read it as the New England Home for the Dead. And that was a way that my brain, in a dark kind of space, subverted that idea
Right.
that we have holding places on this earth. I created this piece that's about life and what it's about and how we handle it while we're here and how we handle it later on.
Karen, what's your reaction to the piece? How do you like it?
Well, the funny thing is, I produced it last October in New York, a table reading with, he put together a beautiful group of amazing Broadway and film actors. And it was just them, like 7 people or so, and then me and maybe 2 or 3 friends. And he wouldn't allow me to read it before I produced it. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my God, this is my story. And Stephen was he didn't tell me Stephen was the star of the play. So I'm like having a heart attack in the room the first night. And then we went on to produce it at Nordstrom Music Theater in December, sold out. This is the funny thing. We were on the Christmas Carol stage, so we could only do a section. 420 tickets we sold, which was Stephen's birthday, 420. And then we just most recently brought it to New York for in front of an audience of the top producers on Broadway. And people love it. He immediately was offered several theaters want to produce it. We're waiting for something bigger. He's still fine-tuning the piece. But the title is so dark, but it's actually hilariously funny.
Right.
You know, like,
I don't think the title's dark, actually. I actually, it makes me smile because immediately I think to myself, now, where would that be going? You know,
Yes.
where with a title like that, where is it going?
Yeah, and the story, when we talk about it, I want to be clear for anyone that's listening, that the story is not one of COVID. The word COVID, the virus is never once mentioned in that way. The piece is interestingly set in the first week of March, where the world is shutting down and no one has any clue what is happening. It is my idea of, this unknown virus is wreaking havoc on the world and we don't know what's happening.
Right.
So what happens ultimately is the show begins in an abandoned nursing home. And it is in this world set in Rhode Island, where Stephen and I used to go photograph the birds on the beach. And it is tucked behind Theater by the Sea, which is where him and I used to get to create together. And what ultimately happens is we're in this abandoned nursing home and 6 souls just materialize out of thin air, and they come to not know where they are, and they discover that this may be the afterlife. And this afterlife is ultimately a place where they have to figure out now, what is the next step? Where do we go? And how is the afterlife just another home here on Earth? Right. We always thought it was something so different. So in all of the ways, I talk about a lot of the elements that we all believe different. None of us truly knows what happens, but we had this collective experience of not knowing what happens when the world shut down. And they are ultimately met by a surprise character at the very end of Act 1 who is hilarious and really enticing through Act 2 that I won't give away all the secrets, but she comes and joins them, and she is on the other side, actually alive, but she's able to divinely communicate with the other side.
Wow. It's an incredibly hopeful piece. It really, everyone who comes to see it says, wow, this really gives me hope for my loved ones who have passed. It's very healing, I have to say. And that's what, Nate, your work is. Let's talk a little bit about Nana Nana and your most recent, everything he does is about healing through art. All of the pieces he's written, which are superb. We actually had another piece, Letters from War, that we premiered actually must have been pre-COVID, right?
2018.
Yeah, which is another amazing piece. But talk about Nana Nana, since we're going to be announcing soon the publishing of that piece.
Yeah, so you get the special pre-news that we are a book that I've created and written over the last 4 years now. I can't believe 5 years actually, is being published on September 17th. And it will be going on pre-sale on March 1st. It is a book called Nana Nana, which is a young boy's experience with his Nana's discovery of Alzheimer's, and ultimately the journey of how her mind is changing and how he, as a young boy, in the same way that any child can, uses his imagination and the sense of wonder to allow Nana to be present in those moments where she disappears from the present moment.
Wow.
And that is something that's really, really important to me. My Nana Gertrude passed away in 2017. And in that journey, about 7 years of her having Alzheimer's, that we knew about, and dementia, it was heart-wrenching. I think the disease strips someone that you love in this current moment away from the current moment, and you lose that sense of who they are now. But what I found so beautiful about Alzheimer's, and what I wanted to help others see, is that the young ones around me, and the way that you can use playfulness and theater. In theater, what I do as a writer and a director and creator is we call yes and. And yes and is the idea that you never say no. And you just say, yes, and what about this? And that idea with Alzheimer's is really important, being able to support the person in their moment when they're thinking that their father is telling them that they can't go outside until they finish cleaning the home. And, these moments that were burned into my brain as I was watching this loved one who, I grew up with for so long, just becoming someone else that I didn't know. So I became dedicated to Alzheimer's and research and what we can do to use art as healing through that. And in 2018, we did Letters from War, which is a 90-minute one-act musical about Alzheimer's and about an elderly woman's journey through Alzheimer's in that way. And it's really, to me, one of the most profound things I've done as an artist. And then Nana Nana, this children's book, birthed from that, because I said, I've created this piece for adults, for our age, for above and below, but nothing for children yet who can talk about this. And children actually can be a key for the change that we need. They can teach their adults so much with this playfulness. So I've created that book, and actually I have this, what I did to get the book out there is I created this small kind of handmade version of the book throughout the time, and my illustrator.
Nate, it's
Hold that page,
beautiful.
Nate. So that's Stephen photographing. So what we did to fund the book, that's my mother in the red and pink outfit. And we had our friends contribute to help pay for the
Illustration.
illustrator.
Right.
And our family members are all in there who died of Alzheimer's. My mother-in-law, my mother, his grandmother. And so it's, really.
So for our listeners
That's
who
little
can't see this, it is just beautifully, it's a children's book, beautifully illustrated.
Yeah.
Nana Nana is the name of it. And Nate, again, tell everybody when that's going to be available.
Yes. So the book goes on pre-sale March 1st, 2024, and it's available hard copies in hand September 17th nationwide. It is available internationally as well. The information about the book can be found on www.alzheimerschildrensbook.com. That is our host for that. And we have an Instagram as well, Alzheimer's Children's Book. And that is ultimately aimed at helping families breach the conversation about loss and grief and aging, just in general. I think the idea that we grow up so fast as a child, but also the adults that are above us and that are raising us grow up equally as fast. And sometimes it feels, as I'm now approaching 30,
Right.
and I feel
the ripe old age
in my bones, life gets faster as it goes.
Absolutely.
So it's just that idea of really using art to actually bridge conversations instead of just being a tap dance on stage. For me, I love tap dancing and I love big musicals like that. But the art that is most at home in my heart is art that helps people move through their grief and experience life in a little bit more meaningful way.
Well, you're doing just that, and I know you've meant so much to Karen and her journey, and you've been there for it. I hope that we get to see the play, the Seaview play, someplace really big in big lights, because I think that sounds like something that so many people could use in their lives. So Nana Nana is the book, and a pre-sale is March 1st. You can buy that book in hard copy in September. And Nate Bertone, you are adorable, and you've got so many other things that I know we'd love to hear about. Unfortunately, we just don't have the time today. Promise you'll come back?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today, and thank you for all of the kind words and the time that you've given me.
Absolutely. You're watching and listening to Kerrigan and Company. I have to tell you, folks, I think lighting in your home is one of the most important things that you can do to keep the house updated. And when I need new lighting, I head to Lucia Lighting and Design. Their spectacular 10,000 square foot showroom inside a beautiful mansion in Lynn, Massachusetts is decorated with both architectural and decorative lighting in every single style. From crystal and traditional to contemporary and modern, the selection is absolutely unmatched. Whenever I'm looking for new lighting, as I mentioned, I head to Lucia Lighting and Design. And when I'm not sure exactly what I'm looking for, I rely on the expert guidance of their design team. I know that they can help me. Learn more and book your appointment today. It's lucialighting.com. Do you know what generative AI is and how your company can ensure employees are more productive? Focus Technology can help you master the use of Microsoft's newest tool, Copilot. This powerful tool can help your team speed up many of their daily tasks by enabling hands-on learning directly with the software. It can summarize long emails, generate drafts of long documents, and search for answers to key questions. Copilot represents a unique opportunity for businesses to accelerate their understanding of what generative AI can deliver for their company. Contact Focus Technology today to learn more at focustsi.com and bring your organization into the AI revolution. That's focustsi.com.
Big Night Studios is now open for all content creators. Are you looking to start a podcast? Looking to expand your brand? Then visit bignightmedia.com. Check out our rates, check out the studio, and see all the podcasts we have to offer. That's bignightmedia.com.
This segment of Kerrigan & Company is brought to you by Great Point Wealth Advisors. If you're close to retirement and want a better plan for the future, connect with greatpointwealth.com today. That's Great Point Wealth. They can help. This is Kerrigan & Company. Welcome back to Kerrigan & Company, brought to us by A&B Burger. Karen, we're going to do our Fast Five. Now, Karen has been a little bit nervous about doing Fast Five. We usually do Fast Five in the first part of the podcast, but obviously today I didn't think that really was the spot for it. But this is the spot for it, so I hope you're prepared.
I'm ready.
It's Focus Technology Fast Five. Focus Technology is our trusted IT partner for cybersecurity, cloud, and managed services. All right, so what we do here, Karen, is I'm going to throw 5 things out to you. Pete, our engineer, is going to start the clock. You get 30 seconds. And I think you're used to this in the theater. If you don't hit the 30 seconds, then a hook comes and pulls you out.
Oh, my, I'm scared.
That's the end of it. I think if it was me, I would just sit here going like this. I want to see that hook. Go ahead.
Do I get to say next, pass?
Right. Yes, you can. You can. All right, here we go. Are you ready?
Ready.
Musical or play?
Musical.
Favorite theatrical production of all time?
Les Mis.
Favorite at the North Shore Music Theater?
Les Mis.
Best actor at the North Shore Music Theater?
David Coffey in A Christmas Carol.
Why did I know? I knew.
That was easy.
And Karen, I know that you can sing. So if there was a role that you could play, what would it be?
Oh, dear God. My problem is I can't memorize anything. But I guess, I don't know, maybe like Gypsy, the lead in Gypsy, something like that.
Oh, I love it.
But really, Les Mis, the roles in Les Mis, I've always, wanted to play one of those. But yeah, I would probably say maybe a Gypsy. Or no, Hello, Dolly. Let's go with Hello, Dolly.
And there you go. And that's our Fast Five. And that was so easy, right?
Not bad. I was nervous.
David Coffey. Talk a little bit about David Coffey.
Oh, my God. He's a dream. He's such a dream. He's going to be doing his 30th production this year. It's our 35th, his 30th. And I have seen A Christmas Carol with very famous people in it all over the place. And there is no better Scrooge anywhere. I just adore him in every role, really, not just as Scrooge.
Yeah. I have seen David as Scrooge there 4 times, I believe, over the course of the years. And each time he gets better. And, you would think it's a role that maybe he'd start to walk in his sleep doing, and he does not.
He has never
And I've had
phoned it in,
different
ever.
people with me always who have so appreciated just watching him. So that leads us to a conversation about what's coming up, what the season looks like at the North Shore Music Theater.
It's a really exciting season. I will tell you, last year we came off of a great season, which we really needed after 3 years of COVID audiences or lack thereof. And so we're going to do 7 shows this year. We're going to open up with Jersey Boys in May. And then we're going to do a big production of Fiddler on the Roof, which is a hugely popular title, in June. And then we are finally able to announce that we are going to be doing a lavish production of Frozen in July for 3 weeks. And then in August, we'll bring in Tootsie, which is a hilariously funny musical based on the movie that we've all seen. And then in the fall, we're going to do $1 Million Quartet, which is a great show about a recording that took place randomly one night with, Carl Perkins, Elvis, Johnny Cash, and I'll have to think of who the fourth one is, and Jerry Lee Lewis. And then we're going to do a huge production of Titanic in October, November, which is daunting. I mean, all of these shows are daunting this year. Yeah. And then, of course, we'll finish up with A Christmas Carol, our 35th time doing it.
Wow, terrific. I've never seen Jersey Boys.
Really?
Maybe shouldn't admit that in a public place.
It's one of my favorite shows of all time.
Yeah.
Favorite musicals of all time. It's brilliant. You'll have to come see it.
I'm definitely going to catch that when it comes to the theater this time, because I just, for whatever reason, have never, all of those you've said, I've seen most all of those, but never seen Jersey Boys.
And I have to say, of the newer titles, that would be probably my favorite.
There you go.
In the Mamma Mia world,
Sure.
in the Jersey Boys world, and that kind of thing.
Yep.
But
Fiddler on the Roof, though. Oh, my
I know.
Goodness
and
gracious.
speaking of David Coffey, my favorite Fiddler on the Roof, and I've seen it with Zero Mostel and Topol. David Coffey played it years ago for us in the 11th hour. We had put a celebrity in who had to cancel, and he was my favorite Tevye of all time.
I had the great opportunity of seeing Topol in it as well here in Boston, his last tour, and it was fantastic. But I could see where David Coffey could pull that role off and be very, very good. Obviously the arts are such an important part of your life. Not only are they your living, but they've helped you heal through some very difficult times. Do you think the arts are being supported the way they need to? There's been such a push. There was a push, in the late 80s and the early 90s to make sure the arts were supported. And then that sort of died off. What's your feeling about it, Karen?
My feeling is there's never enough money for the arts.
I'm sure.
And especially for someone like us, it's North Shore is a for-profit organization. So we are one of the only theaters in the country surviving with just butts and seats. We do some corporate work, but it's, you don't have the write-offs that you do when you're a nonprofit. And so we were lucky enough, and I challenged this. We had, the great Michael Bobbitt from the Mass Cultural Council. I was on a panel one day, and I said, we are fiscally more responsible than a lot of nonprofits are. As Bill Haney says, they're not responsible because it's not their money. We run on one man's money, and it's not endless. And Bill saved the theater and Theater by the Sea and some other things that we have in the works. But there's never enough money. But the Mass Cultural Council did give us some money during post-COVID because I had brought that up on a panel once. So no, there's never enough money, and we are lucky to be able to survive.
Right.
And it's getting harder and harder because when Bill bought the theater, minimum wage was $8 an hour. Now it's $15. Our utility bills are double the cost. And even though our usage is down, it's still double the cost. Sure. So we're doing everything we can to manage our expenses, but it is getting more and more difficult. And we do it because our team is amazing and everyone, works their tails off to make. We would all take a bullet for that place. I mean, we just would. We have an amazing team, and but it is hard. And no, there's never enough money.
Well, this is my lack of knowledge, so help me out here if you will. But when you have a smaller theater like that, then of course we have, Broadway, Boston, we have these bigger houses.
Yes.
These smaller, they really are the ones that run that risk of losing them. It feels like to me you guys have done an incredible job up there on the North Shore of making it appealing to a really broad base audience.
Well, it's been helpful over the past few years that we've been able to get some newer titles. So we're not going to get a Wicked or a Lion King for a very long time. If it's on Broadway or touring, we cannot get it because we're in the Boston market and we're considered competition to that in Broadway. So I think last year and really the year before, we have had a lot more. There's like a new passion or a renewed passion for North Shore that hasn't been there in a long time because it's not Oklahoma for the 50th time, you know?
Right.
And when you can bring in Mamma Mia and Jersey Boys, young people come and they start to subscribe because they say, oh, this is pretty cool. Or you get them in we did Elvis last year. It did record-breaking numbers. It was a new work, but people love Elvis. So if you cater to that baby boomer audience and whatnot, like $1 Million Quartet is pacing very well of all shows, but it's because the baby boomers are coming for it. But the young moms are coming too and partying and letting their hair down with the Mamma Mias of the world.
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
Margaritaville and, you know, the Jimmy Buffett piece, that kind of thing.
Well, and you guys you've built such a beautiful place to go for an evening. I mean, I honestly, if you haven't been, you know, I mean, I don't work for you guys. So I want that to be known. I don't work for the North Shore Music Theater, but I absolutely love it. There's nothing like a July night. You come up, you get a drink, you sit outside. It's gorgeous there.
The grounds are beautiful.
You see the show. You know, it's just a perfect evening out.
Yeah.
It really is.
Excuse me, but Bill says from the minute you cross our threshold, I want it to be like Disneyland. I want the lights to be perfect. I want the sound to be perfect. I want the drinks to be perfect. And it is. It's just gorgeous. And I think people can see that we're there to stay. Every year he puts more and more money into it, whether it's new wicker furniture or new, you know, outdoor bars, whatever it is. He's working really hard to make sure that people stay engaged.
Well, I'll tell you this. I enjoy a show in the city, but I really always check to see what the season is like up at the North Shore Music Theater first. It's just an easier trip, and the talent is great. And like I said at the very beginning, to see a show in the round is just off the charts for me.
It is, and
I
it's
just absolutely love
Broadway
it.
in Beverly for, you know, a fraction of the cost of going to New York or Boston.
Sure. Thank you. You shared your story. It's been amazing, and I have enjoyed every second of it. You're listening to Kerrigan and Company. Is your life getting more complex? Maybe jobs are changing, you're nearing retirement, shifting family dynamic, uncertainty about your financial future. It may be the right time to contact our sponsor, Great Point Wealth Advisors, for holistic planning and advice. Great Point Wealth Advisors is a registered investment advisory firm with offices in Boston and Danvers, Massachusetts. Listen to their short-form podcast, Great Points, on most streaming platforms or contact them at greatpointwealth.com. That's greatpointwealth.com. That's going to do it for this edition of Kerrigan and Company. I want to thank Karen and Nate for coming in and sharing their stories. It's absolutely incredible. Again, a thank you to our sponsor, A&B Burger. Tom Holland, we appreciate everything you do for us. Remember that you can get this podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts on any platform. So be sure you check it out, and we will see you again next week. Thanks, everybody, for listening to Kerrigan and Company. To find out who will keep me company and be my co-host on the next episode, be sure you follow us on Instagram, Facebook, X, and TikTok. Kerrigan and Company is recorded at the Big Night Studios at the TD Garden in Boston. You can view the podcast on YouTube and listen to it wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure you tell a friend. The executive producer of Kerrigan and Company is David Thompson. Our engineer is Peter Hurley, and our social media managers are Grace Kerrigan, Colby Thompson, and Riley Thompson. See you next time.
Yes, Kerrigan and Company is here.